Marcus Red Holloway was a name that echoed fear across the streets of Chicago. Born into a world of poverty, drugs, and violence, Marcus never had a real chance at a normal life. By the age of 12, he was already a seasoned pickpocket. By 15, he was running errands for one of the most feared gangs in the South Side. And by 22, he was the gang's most ruthless enforcer, cold, calculated, and untouchable. His criminal record read like a horror story: armed robbery, extortion, kidnapping, and finally, the murder of 2 undercover detectives during a drug raid gone wrong. It was that last crime that sealed his fate. The city exploded with outrage. News outlets ran his mugshot on every screen and headline. Red Holloway, the devil of the South Side, they called him. The trial was nothing short of a spectacle. Dozens of reporters packed the courtroom each day, while people gathered outside holding signs, some demanding justice, others calling for the death penalty. Marcus sat motionless through most of it, his face unreadable. Witness after witness testified, including former gang members, victims, and law enforcement. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours. When the judge finally spoke, the room went silent. For the brutal and intentional murders of Officers Kelly and Martinez, and for your extensive criminal history, this court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A gasp swept through the courtroom. Marcus blinked once but said nothing. He was escorted out in handcuffs, never once turning back. It was official. The city's most feared criminal would spend the rest of his life behind bars. But what no one could have predicted was that inside those prison walls, something unexpected would begin to change within him. Stateville Maximum Security Prison was a fortress of steel, concrete, and despair, a place where hope went to die. Marcus Holloway entered the prison with the same cold stare he had worn in court. The guards didn't need an introduction. Everyone knew who he was. Inmates whispered his name like a ghost story, and even the most hardened criminals kept their distance. Inside, survival meant dominance, and Marcus thrived in chaos. He joined no prison gangs. He didn't need to. Within weeks, he had already taken down 2 inmates in the yard over a stolen meal tray. In solitary confinement, he smashed his sink and carved symbols into the concrete walls. When guards tried to restrain him, he bit one of them so badly the man needed surgery. The prison administration labeled him a high-risk threat, locking him down 23 hours a day in a tiny windowless cell. His only visitors were cold meals shoved through a slot and guards who never met his gaze for long. He was transferred between isolation units more times than any other inmate in the facility's history. The other prisoners called him Red Death. To them, he was more legend than man, unpredictable, unbreakable, and untouchable. The guards, while trained to deal with dangerous men, treated Marcus differently, with fear, with caution, with hate. Every room he entered fell silent. Every stare he returned was like a death sentence. He didn't speak unless provoked, and when he did, it was with venom. There was no remorse, no regret, just rage simmering beneath the surface. To Marcus, prison wasn't punishment. It was a new battleground. But deep inside that darkness, unnoticed by anyone, a tiny crack was beginning to form in the armor. Someone, was going to push him to his limits. It was a cold November morning when Marcus received the news. A guard slipped a folded note under his cell door without a word. Inside, in trembling handwriting, were 5 words that would break him. Mama passed. Funeral this Friday. He sat still for hours, staring at the paper. His mother, the only person who had ever shown him unconditional love, was gone. No visits, no final goodbye. She had always believed he could change, even when the world had given up on him. Now she was gone, and he was still that same monster locked in a cage. That night, for the first time in years, Marcus cried. Not out of rage, not out of frustration, but pure, helpless sorrow. The following weeks were different. He stopped lashing out. He stopped talking altogether. His fists, once his language, now hung quietly at his sides. He began sitting on his bunk at night, staring at the ceiling, haunted by memories. His mother's voice, the faces of the officers he killed, the tears of his victims' families. One day, he asked for a Bible. The guards were stunned but complied. He spent hours reading it in silence, flipping pages with the same focus he once used to load a gun. He wasn't sure if he believed, but the words gave him something he'd never had. Reflection. Guilt started creeping in like a slow-burning fire. He remembered a kid he once beat near to death for looking at him wrong. He remembered the woman who begged him not to hurt her son. Those memories wouldn't leave him alone. He couldn't sleep. He stopped eating. The nightmares began. Every night, faces from his past staring at him in silence. Marcus Holloway, the man the world called a monster, was beginning to feel something he never had before: remorse. Months passed. Marcus kept to himself, but he was changing. The Bible became his daily companion, and soon it led him to other books: philosophy, history, even poetry. He read about people who had turned their lives around, men who found meaning behind bars. Slowly, the walls he'd built inside began to crack. One afternoon, Marcus approached the prison chaplain. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for paper and a pen. Over the next several weeks, he wrote letters, not to lawyers, not to journalists, but to the families of the officers he killed, and to others he had hurt along the way. They weren't excuses. They were confessions, apologies, honest words from a man who had spent his life pretending he felt nothing. Some letters were returned, others were never answered. But one reply changed everything. A letter from Officer Martinez's widow. She wrote, "I don't forgive you, but I believe in second chances, for my children's sake." That single line lit a fire inside Marcus. He started attending group therapy sessions and enrolled in a prison education program. When a younger inmate nearly committed suicide, Marcus stopped him, sat with him, talked to him, and shared his own pain. Word spread. Guards noticed the difference. The man who once tried to stab an officer now helped clean the chapel. The inmates who once avoided him began to nod at him in the yard. He even earned a nickname, Professor Red, not for his violence, but for always carrying a book. He knew he could never undo the pain he caused. He would never walk free again. But inside those walls, Marcus Holloway was no longer the devil of the South Side. He was becoming something else entirely, a man trying, at last, to do what was right. Years passed. Marcus Holloway remained behind bars, serving the life sentence he had earned. Parole was never an option, and he never asked for it. But within the gray walls of his cell, he found something far greater than freedom: peace. His days became routine. He taught other inmates how to read, led discussions in the prison's education wing, and mentored young men on the brink of self-destruction. He spoke not with authority, but with honesty, using his life as a warning, not a badge of honor. In his final years, his hair turned gray, his body slower, but his mind sharper than ever. He spent his evenings journaling, reflecting on the pain he'd caused and the small good he was trying to leave behind. One of his journals was published anonymously by a prison reform organization. It touched hearts beyond the prison walls. When he died quietly in his sleep at the age of 68, there were no headlines, no media frenzy, just a small memorial in the prison chapel, attended by a handful of guards and inmates who knew the man he had become. But his legacy lived on, in the letters he wrote, the lives he changed, and the belief he sparked in others. That redemption is real. Marcus Holloway will always be remembered for the crimes he committed, but also for the man he fought to become in the aftermath. He was proof that even in the darkest corners of society, even when all hope seems lost, the human spirit can still reach for light. His story isn't one of escape or forgiveness, it's one of accountability, growth, and transformation. Because sometimes the most powerful kind of freedom is found within.